During a major presentation, my boss snatched the clicker from my hand, laughing, "Relax, sweetheart. Let someone smart handle this." The room went silent as he fumbled through my slides, mispronounced client names, and finally said, "Anyway, she's just here to look good." I smiled, sat down, and texted my recruiter. 2 months later, I presented that same project to his old clients as their new account manager. I'm still kind of shocked it all played out the way it did, but I guess when people push you too far, something inside just snaps. I worked at a mid-size marketing agency for almost 4 years. It wasn't a bad job at first. I started as a junior account coordinator and slowly worked my way up. I was good at my job. I built strong relationships with clients, took on projects no one else wanted, and worked late more times than I can count. But I didn't mind, because I thought I was building something. I thought people noticed. Especially my boss. His name was Rick. I'll never forget that name. Rick was one of those guys who thought he was smarter than everyone. He wore expensive suits and liked to hear himself talk. He had charm when he needed it, but when things got tough, he'd throw his own team under the bus without blinking. I stayed out of his way as much as possible. Did my job. Showed up early. Stayed late. Then came the McAllister pitch. That was a huge deal for us. A client with national reach and a fat budget. We'd been trying to land them for years. When they finally agreed to come in for a presentation, I was the one who got assigned the pitch. Rick said, "You've earned it." I spent 6 weeks putting it together, building the strategy, studying their old campaigns, crafting slides, practicing my delivery. It was the biggest project I'd ever worked on. I was nervous but proud. I had my blazer pressed, my slides loaded, and I got to the office an hour early that day. I walked into the boardroom at 9:55 sharp, clicker in hand, ready to go. There were about 15 people in the room, McAllister execs, our senior team, a couple of interns taking notes. I started strong. I had just made it through the first 2 slides when I heard Rick laugh behind me. "Relax, sweetheart," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Let someone smart handle this." Then he walked up, grabbed the clicker from my hand, and shoved me to the side like I was a kid at a family barbecue. I stood there frozen. There was this weird silence in the room. Like no one knew what to say. Rick acted like nothing happened. He started clicking through my slides, reading off them like he hadn't even glanced at the deck before. He kept tripping over the data. Mispronounced 2 of the clients' names. Skipped 4 important points I had planned to explain. Then, just to top it all off, he said, "Anyway, she's just here to look good," and waved toward me without turning around. I felt like I'd been slapped. But I didn't say a word. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat down slowly, took out my phone under the table, and texted my recruiter. "Need out. ASAP. Got anything good?" She replied in 3 minutes flat. "Working on it. Give me 2 weeks." That day changed everything. I was done. But not in a defeated way. I wasn't quitting. I was plotting. Over the next few days, I went into silent mode. I didn't speak to Rick unless I had to. I kept my head down and did my job. What he didn't know, what no one knew, was that I had been building quiet relationships with a lot of our clients over the last year. They didn't just know my name. They trusted me. I made sure to check in with them regularly. I answered emails at 11 p.m. if I had to. I sent them notes on their birthdays. I helped fix things Rick screwed up more times than I can count. So when I started quietly reaching out to say hi, it didn't seem strange. I never trashed Rick. I didn't need to. I just asked questions like, "How's everything going with the team? Hope you're still getting the same support you need." The truth started leaking out on its own. One client told me Rick had missed a strategy call and sent an intern instead. Another said they hadn't received an update in over 3 weeks. People were frustrated. I could feel the tension building. Then 2 weeks later, Monica, my recruiter, came through. She introduced me to Horizon Partners, a competitor across town. Smaller team but more modern. Hungry. They were looking for an account manager with strong client ties. The interview lasted 45 minutes. They offered me the job that night. With a raise. And a signing bonus. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. I handed in my notice on a Thursday, effective immediately. Rick didn't even try to stop me. He made some joke like, "Guess you couldn't handle the heat." I just smiled and walked out. At Horizon, I hit the ground running. And I made one thing very clear. I would not poach anyone. But if clients came to me, I wouldn't turn them away either. And boy, did they come. First was Vincenzi Group. I'd handled their account personally for a year. When they heard I had moved, they called me. "Rick's been dodging our emails," they said. "We want to work with you again." So we signed them. Then Eastgate Logistics followed. Then Whitlock Systems. Each one had the same story. Rick was dropping the ball, missing deadlines, giving vague answers, showing up late or not at all. I didn't say a word about Rick. I just took care of them. I delivered. I answered emails. I followed through. Rick must have been watching it happen because one night he called me from a blocked number. "You think you're clever," he snapped. "You think you can just take what I built?" I let him talk. Then I said, "You didn't build anything. You just took credit." Click. 2 months after I left, I got invited to speak at the biggest marketing conference of the year in Austin. I gave a keynote on rebuilding trust with disengaged clients. I used slides from the original McAllister deck, the one Rick stole. I cleaned them up, made them sharper. I even kept the same format, just improved everything. Guess who was sitting in the second row? Rick. He looked rough, pale, like he hadn't been sleeping. When I got to the part of the presentation he had skipped, the deep client retention strategy, I paused, looked right at him. Then I delivered it perfectly. I wasn't done yet. Next part coming. After the conference, things moved fast. That keynote blew up more than I expected. I got flooded with LinkedIn messages, emails, even a few speaking offers. Horizon's leadership was thrilled. We started getting inbound interest from clients I had never even worked with before. And while I was riding that wave, Rick was sinking. I didn't check in on him much. I didn't need to. People told me things. Word spread fast in our industry. A friend who still worked at the old firm told me HR had started investigating Rick. Something about inappropriate comments in the office. 2 women had already spoken up. There were whispers about a third, someone from HR itself. I wasn't surprised. But here's where things took a turn I didn't expect. One night around 8 p.m. I was still at the office. Everyone else had gone home. I was working on a pitch for a new client when I got a text from an unknown number. "You really think you're done with me?" I stared at the screen. My stomach tightened. I knew it was Rick. I didn't respond. 10 minutes later an email came in.
Anonymous sender.
Subject line. Just a heads up. Inside was a screenshot of a Reddit thread, some industry gossip forum. Someone had posted a rant about a toxic woman who climbs over her coworkers and steals clients behind the scenes. It was vague, but it was about me. Down to the fake initials and references to Horizon. It didn't scare me. Pissed me off. But Horizon took it seriously. They called me into the legal office the next morning. Not to accuse me, just to ask questions. They had my back, but they needed to protect the firm. I told them everything. From the first day Rick disrespected me, to the calls, the messages, the comment during the pitch. I showed them the Reddit post, the email, everything. Their legal team started digging. Within a week they found it. Rick had used his personal Gmail account to send the email. Idiot didn't even bother to mask the IP address. Horizon's lawyers reported it to his firm's HR, and they escalated it. Again. Now he wasn't just facing client loss and HR complaints. He was looking at a defamation case. Still, Rick didn't stop. He sent one more message. A voicemail this time. He didn't yell. He sounded almost calm. But it was worse that way. "You think they'll keep you? You think you're safe? You'll crash. You're nothing without me." I saved the voicemail. Sent it to Horizon's legal team. But I didn't delete it. I listened to it again that night, alone in my apartment. And instead of fear, I felt this slow, cold fire building in my chest. I wasn't scared of Rick. I was just getting started. Because what he didn't know was that I'd made a friend inside his company. A quiet one. Someone in operations. Someone who knew things. And they had just given me something that could destroy whatever was left of Rick's career. More soon. The friend I mentioned, her name is Bailey. We weren't close when I worked at the old firm, but we'd always been friendly. She worked in ops, kept to herself mostly. I think people overlooked her, which was their mistake. A few days after Rick's last voicemail, Bailey sent me a message. You didn't get this from me, but you should see it. Attached was a folder of internal documents. Real ones. Slides, reports, time logs, even emails. And what they showed was crystal clear. Rick had been padding client hours. Badly. Like charging Vincenzi for strategy calls that never happened. Billing Eastgate for ad budgets that didn't exist. He was marking things up. Billing extra hours on campaigns that had ended months ago. And it had gone unnoticed because he'd used some clever copy-paste tricks to fudge the reports. I stared at those files for 2 straight hours. I wasn't just looking at lies. I was looking at fraud. Bailey was careful. She told me she only sent the files because she had already reported it through internal channels, and no one had acted on it. She didn't trust HR to do the right thing. Especially not after how they'd slow-walked the earlier complaints. She wanted a paper trail somewhere else. You don't have to use it, she said, but if he comes for you again, now you're armed. I didn't respond right away. Honestly, I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to forward the whole damn thing to every client Rick ever had. Burn him to the ground. But something told me to wait. And I'm glad I did. Because just 1 week later, Rick tried again. It was subtle this time. I found out from one of my Horizon clients that Rick had reached out to them behind my back. Told them he'd heard concerning things, about Horizon's work ethic. Said, we don't have the same energy we used to when she was with us. That was all I needed. I waited until Friday afternoon. I forwarded the documents Bailey gave me to Horizon's legal team. Not anonymously. I signed my name. And I didn't stop there. I sent an email directly to 3 of Rick's former clients. The ones he'd defrauded. Just the facts. Just enough to make them ask questions.
No emotion. No accusations.
Just data and receipts. And then I waited. By Monday morning, all hell broke loose. Vincenzi launched an internal audit. Eastgate followed. Horizon's lawyers got a call from McAllister's in-house counsel. HR at Rick's firm suddenly went radio silent. Bailey texted me one line that made me grin. He's spiraling. But even then, I didn't celebrate. Not yet. Because there was still one more thing. Something I hadn't told anyone. Rick wasn't just padding hours. He was using my old reports to do it. When I realized what Rick had done, used my old reports, copied my formatting, reused the templates I had built, I finally understood why so much of his fake billing looked familiar. It was my work. He had pulled the files from the old shared drive before I left. Then he doctored them. Adjusted timestamps. Changed a few numbers. But the structure, the wording, the flow, it was all mine. I was furious. Not because of what he did to me before, but because he tried to drag my name into something illegal. He thought he could cover his mess by using the tools I built. And now I had proof. I brought it to Horizon's legal team again, and this time they didn't just handle it quietly. They escalated it. Fast. They knew this wasn't just workplace bullying or office politics. This was fraud, and Rick had committed it using intellectual property that technically belonged to Horizon now. Because I'd brought those templates with me when I was hired, and we'd since developed them further under Horizon's platform. Rick hadn't just messed with the wrong person. He had messed with the wrong company. What happened next was brutal. Horizon filed a formal complaint with the Industry Regulatory Board. At the same time, Vincenzi and Eastgate launched external investigations into billing discrepancies. Rick's firm tried to play it cool at first, calling it an internal miscommunication. But then the receipts came out. One of the invoices had my initials watermarked at the bottom. I used to tag early drafts that way just to track versions. Rick hadn't even noticed it when he copied the file. And when Bailey was finally contacted by external investigators, she gave a full sworn statement. Turns out she had been saving everything for months, email chains, internal Slack messages, even a voicemail where Rick joked about milking the Eastgate cow a little longer. By the time it hit the news, it was too late for damage control. Rick was fired. Not asked to resign. Not quietly let go. He was fired with cause. His name blacklisted from every major firm in the region. They made a statement full on public. We do not tolerate unethical billing practices. His LinkedIn profile was wiped clean within a week. His reputation? Dead. Every client we had worked with saw it. I didn't need to send any more emails. They came to me. But it didn't stop there. The firm he worked for took a hit too. Investors pulled out of their upcoming rebrand. Their biggest contract, worth 7 figures, backed out. Turns out that contract was with McAllister. And guess who they signed with instead? Horizon. And me? They offered me a promotion. Director of accounts. Bigger office. A team under me. I was making more than I ever thought possible. But I didn't take the title right away. There was something I had to do first. I visited Rick. I didn't plan to. But I knew where he'd be. There was a local job fair downtown, one of those sad career transitions expos. Bailey told me he was scheduled to speak on a panel about navigating career setbacks. I almost laughed when I saw his name on the flyer. I walked in just as his panel started. He looked thinner, tired, wearing a suit that didn't fit quite right. The confidence was gone. When he saw me in the audience, his eyes widened. For a second, I thought he'd leave. But he didn't. He tried to keep speaking, but he stumbled over his words. His hands shook. He lost his place twice. At one point, someone from the crowd asked about ethical challenges in leadership. He froze. Didn't answer. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just stood up and walked out. Later that week, I accepted the promotion. Bailey joined Horizon too. We brought her in as our new compliance manager. She's thriving. And Rick? Last I heard, he was doing freelance work, small stuff. Website copy for startups. His name had become a joke in most circles. People say he ricked it, meaning to screw up something that was handed to you on a silver platter. There's a kind of justice in that. But here's the truth. None of this would have happened if I hadn't stayed calm that day in the boardroom. If I had shouted or stormed out, I would have been painted as emotional, dramatic. Instead, I played the long game. I watched him sabotage himself piece by piece, and when the time was right, I gave him the final push. Was it revenge? Yes. But more than that, it was restoration. He took my work, my voice, my credit. I took his future, and I didn't need to raise mine to do it.